I'm trying to practice minimalism, but finding it hard. How do you know where the line is of what to keep and what to get rid of? That's a really interesting one. And like a lot of these topics, it, I suppose, makes you think a little bit more deeply about what we really mean by minimalism. And we could go the path of trying to get rid of all our stuff, and that might help us. We might feel liberated and free with it ourselves. Or we might think, oh my God, where's all my stuff and I really, really need it. And what might then happen is we might spend a lot more time and effort trying to do things that we now can't do easily because we've got rid of stuff that we needed, which is a little bit counterproductive. Or the other thing that might happen is we might physically get rid of things, and that certainly can help mentally. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we just become mentally busy and we're doing a lot of thinking instead of engaging physically with things in front of us. So it's not that minimalism isn't a good idea, but it's more, I suppose, about being universal about how we think about minimalism. It needs to add up. If you're getting rid of a particular object, if you want a little less clutter, in a sense, by removing something, the goal is to gain something. So is minimalism even possible with that definition? It is, if we define it as getting rid of certain things. But of course, having less clutter means having more space. So there's always kind of two sides. There's a duality to it. So sometimes a useful thing to do here is to almost change the focus from removing things to one of prioritizing things. The question is, if we have a certain amount of attention, if we have a certain amount of hours in the day, if we have a certain amount of physical space, if we have a certain amount of financial resources, a certain amount of energy, either way they're going to go in one direction or another. So what is the direction that they go in? What's most useful? What do we want to reduce, I suppose, the bandwidth for? And what do we want to increase the bandwidth for? What actually matters to us? What do we want to prioritize? So minimalism, as we classically think of it in terms of getting rid of stuff, is a lot of the time a useful thing, because human psychology being what it is, much of the time we tend to lean towards more stuff rather than less stuff. Not always, but in many cases that is what will end up happening. So if that is what's happening, well then I suppose on average getting rid of stuff may be a useful thing to do. But still, the question I suppose is one more of utility, because clearly a tradesperson who has their various tools and gets rid of those tools and now has fewer tools may sometimes find certain jobs much harder, which may make them more difficult, which means they either can't do that job or they need to take longer at it and they need to improvise, or maybe they just need to try and make the tool again and improvise in that way, which isn't really that useful. But what you can do, it's good to do, I think, is a little bit of an audit and just think, well, what do I actually use? And that's part of assessing your priorities. So if you're conscious of what your values are, what matters most to you over the next while, then you can look at some of the stuff that you have, and that also includes some of the thoughts that you think. And you can question, well, are these ways of thinking useful? Are these ways of spending time useful? Are these objects useful? Are these places I go useful? Are these patterns useful? And if not, then discarding them and letting go and breathing, creating more space could be a very, very good idea. However, if they are useful, if they are the kinds of things that you find are helpful, well then they should probably be embraced and welcomed. So focusing on values and priorities in that way is probably a good way to think about this, to start sorting it. Keep the comments coming if you have any personal experience with this. Do you have stacks of stuff everywhere, or are you one of these people who just, the house is like a kind of an empty Zen studio, and there's maybe you and just a mat? And how does that work for you? If so, do you sit there peacefully, or does that create other problems or challenges? It's always a duality to these things. If you found this valuable, do like, subscribe, and share. And what's your experience? Do you have any questions or topic suggestions? You can contribute in the comments, on social media using #BodyMindSelf, or at jfl.com.